Hello, everyone. My name is Leila Najmi, and I'm going to talk to you about administration fairness and best practices. So in preparing for the interview, it's a lot like a normal interview that you would prepare for. There's a few considerations that you might have, and it's going to remain the same as regular interviews, but you might want to consider your candidate pool, planning your interview length and other characteristics of your interview. Do your research on the interview and the position itself. Make sure that the questions you're asking are job related. Typical phone interview or remote interview is around 30 minutes. So plan for about 5 to 10, and 10 might even be too many questions depending on how elaborate the questions are and how much detail is asking for. And create a system for assigning candidate scores. Again, this is something you would do even if it was not a remote interview. You want to make sure you can distinguish a well-qualified, a minimally qualified, or not qualified candidate from one another. And it's recommended that you actually have a consistent pattern. So ask the same questions in the same order from every candidate. This can make sure that you have more, the interview is fair for all candidates in question, and avoid leading the candidate towards better answers. I understand in this format it's going to be more nerves and other things, but we definitely want to avoid all the stuff that we would normally avoid in interviews and not lead candidates, and make sure that we give everybody an equal opportunity. So the video conference interview, I mean, in the face of true face-to-face connection, video interview is the best. Statistically, up to 55% of human communication is expressed with body language and other physical cues. So it is highly recommended that you do the interviews with video when possible. And there's candidate anxiety that can result from the novelty of video conference. We're not familiar. Even having a webinar, I mean, we've had some hiccups and we're trying to resolve through them, even with this. So definitely it is an unfamiliar territory for the candidate and maybe even to you. So clearly communicate start times, logistics. You might want to do a test run before the interview. You might want to rehearse the process. So maybe have a coworker, a peer that you can actually do a call with and see how it goes and what problems you're running into and what you might need to do with the particular software that you're using. And start the call and conference before the candidates actually get on. I mean, I think we've all been into conference calls or webinars, etc., where we're just sitting there waiting and they're like, yeah, your host hasn't started. So that's going to add to the anxiety. So we definitely want to avoid that. And despite having the video, it can still be challenging to pick up subtle cues about the candidate anxiety. So it's especially important to take proactive measures. You might want to start the interview with planned small talk. That might ease some nerves. And start the interview, offer candidates opportunity to return to questions, and ensure the questions are read slowly and clearly. And I think we also offered it previously, is that you can also maybe display the questions if you're able to share with the type of platform that you're using, where the candidate can actually follow along with you on the questions. So again, if you practice this, it's a better idea to practice before you actually have this type of interview, if it's the first time that you're doing it. Preparing your environment. I mean, everybody knows about first impressions. It's still true even with the video environment. You want to make sure that, you know, do your due diligence on your physical environment. You want to make sure that you're not disrupted. There's no interruptions for the interview, and turn off devices. You definitely don't want message beeps, etc., phone calls in the background. That definitely can be distracting. And if you're on video, dress the same way that you would do in an in-person interview. Obviously, and it should be industry appropriate. Not all industries may have like a suit and tie, etc., but if that's what's appropriate for your industry and that's what you normally do, it's recommended that you continue doing that. And have a neutral background. If that's possible, try to have that so it's not distracting. If you've got like a TV playing in your background, that could distract the candidate. So you just want to make sure, or if there's like a really busy artwork or something, again, that could be distracting to the candidate. So we want to make sure that we avoid those. And just check yourself on the camera, see what's going up in the background. Maybe you weren't even aware that there's something in the background that that there is. So when you check your camera, maybe you can adjust that before the interview. And you definitely want to make a first impression. I mean, the candidate's interviewing you just as much as you are interviewing them. This is true in an in-person or a video interview. So just these are some of the steps that you can take to make a better impression for your candidate. And this might eventually have the candidate make a decision if they want to accept your job offer or not. So preparing yourself, conduct your interview in a similar manner in an in-person one when possible, and practice again beforehand if you can, and be comfortable. Be comfortable with yourself. Again, if you've practiced, you're going to be more comfortable with yourself. And if you're nervous, the candidates will pick up on that behavior, your nervousness, abnormal behavior. So you definitely want to get over your nerves. And if you have to practice a few times, maybe do that. And set up your screen in a position that you can neutrally look at the camera straight on. Oftentimes on our iPads, laptops, etc., the cameras may be placed in an unnatural area. So just make sure that you're looking into the camera, because if you're looking at the candidate's impressions, if the candidate's on a different screen, it may not appear like you're looking at the camera. So make a deliberate effort to look into the camera so it appears as if you're looking at the candidate. This can give more comfort to the candidate as well. And interviews are stressful for candidates, even in best times. So be flexible, be accommodating when you can. So we're going to talk about measurement error. And this can occur when, with any event that can change the interview outcome. So measurement error can result in candidate selection error, where you may pass up the best candidate unintentionally. Common sources can be like technology problems, interruptions, slip-ups, or even some anxiety and stuff like that. So you definitely want to consider that, the candidate anxiety, and it can also be potentially amplified by the novelty of the situation. And I think we're all experiencing that too. So you're not alone in that. And for mitigating effort, unfortunately, there is no detection meter. You can mitigate by following best practices. Make sure all candidates are treated equally, and unexpected problems can happen. Do your best to anticipate them and have backup plans when possible. And that can kind of help mitigate some of the measurement errors. And to mitigate error, we must acknowledge and understand the types of error that we could possibly face. So we have actually provided in the slide, and you'll have the slide available to you after the presentation, a list of the types of errors that can possibly happen. And I'll just pick one randomly, the expectation error. This is the tendency that you have prior knowledge of the candidate, so you perceive the candidate differently. So this can happen when there's like an internal candidate. I think this happens, we've probably heard of this happening. It's like the person already, so you assess them a little bit differently. And so these are the types of errors that could possibly happen. Just familiarize yourself with them so you can avoid them. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jason with interview questions and assessment security.